Hi, everyone. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Burjama. Super excited to be hosting this session for you all today. As someone who is fascinated by both the promise and the chaos of AI, I've been actually looking forward to this discussion where we talk about AI, sustainability, security, the future of AI, basically, together. As some of you might already know, in the last year, deepfake-driven fraud has surged roughly 3 to 4 times globally, with fake voices and fake faces making up 1 out of 15 fraud attempts. And when we look into the sustainability side of things, literally, analysts predict that AI systems are going to be consuming half of all data center electricity worldwide. So we're talking about serious environmental cost. So today, we're not just going to be talking about where AI is heading, but how we can make it more human, sustainable, and secure. And I have 2 brilliant minds with me who are actually dealing with this on a day-to-day basis. We have Alex Mansalopoulos, who is leading Europe for Persona, the company that's helping giants like OpenAI and LinkedIn, identifying, verifying, and protecting millions of users for them. And we also have Dan Lupu with us, partner at Earlybird, one of the leading VCs in Europe, and an early backer of companies like UiPath and Peak Games. So welcome again. I would love to start with Alex, with you. You're sitting at the front line of digital identity verification. So from everything that you're seeing in the last couple of years, where do you see digital trust evolving as AI becomes more human-like?
Yeah, it's a great first question. I think in the past, KYC and identity verification used to be about just trying to confirm someone is who they say they are, right? And that would mean trying to confirm whether an ID is real or not. And what we're seeing now is that as trust is evolving, as AI has come on the scene, this whole relationship has become more dynamic and less time-bound, right? So instead of doing something transactional, we're actually having companies kind of look at the people that they're onboarding and ask themselves, okay, that's great that we onboarded someone, but now later on in the life cycle, when this customer wants to perform another transaction, is it the same person that onboarded in the first place? And so what we're seeing is not just, okay, at the point of onboarding, are they who they say they are, but also in the long term, thinking about trust signals, thinking about is this the same device that this user is using? And so building that trust profile over time, that's becoming more important. So someone's identity is not just a one-time thing, it's actually over the lifetime of that user. Yeah.
And I will dive into the long-term effect of that in a second, because you just mentioned something really critical of the short-term versus the long-term identity impact that we have, which we're going to get to in a second. Then I want to jump to you really quickly from the investor perspective. When we talk about, especially deepfake-related fraud, from the investor perspective for startups, how do you see this being embedded into their brand DNA? And are there particular signals that you look into within founders, whether if it's important for them that their users or consumers trust their brand or not?
As investors, we tend to take the approach that the market should judge founders, and we rely on how the market reacts to certain features or certain aspects of the product that are being reflected and appreciated or not by the market. So we take an off-piste approach without relying on our own judgment, but trying to get to see how traction reflects on products. But we do acknowledge that now this is something that is bothersome to people. People are more and more afraid of what potentially can happen. And we are now discussing about in-person transactions and how people can impersonate. But there's a ton of risk in the underlying infrastructure, where transactions that are not involving people are becoming more and more prevalent, and those are totally exposed because you cannot trust or verify the identity of an AI agent, right?
100%. And are there particular methods that you kind of give as a guideline or potentially a roadmap for the startups that you guys are backing up to make sure they're preventing against this?
Obviously, it starts from the very basics, from code review. There are now companies that are doing quite a good job of looking at even legacy code to discover potential bugs, because the reality is that any bug that is being discovered can be automatically turned into an attack vector. Usually these are fairly expensive mistakes to address from a compute perspective. So what we see is that dealing with security threats becomes also a matter of compute efficiency. You cannot just throw all the time breach and attack simulations at your customer's infrastructure, because they cannot really handle both the load, the legitimate load, and the testing at the same time. So we see people trying to create digital twins of both the physical and the application infrastructure of their customers, and trying to simulate attacks in a much more compute efficient way using this kind of approach.
Which you highlighted a lot of different parameters that is not just limited to one kind of risk. Actually, it can involve a lot of different areas, which is super critical.
It does evolve, and it evolves at a speed that you cannot really deal with it on a human basis. So CISOs are concerned about how to automate the process of discovering and responding to emerging threats.
I love that. And Alex, I'll come back to you. We, as I just mentioned, Persona is verifying and protecting millions of users for kind of like the big players in the game like OpenAI. And we're running into a lot of the deepfake trends, a lot of the news that are coming up in this field. But I'm sure you're seeing the most up-and-coming trends in the fraud ecosystem. So is there anything where you would say, like, these have been kind of the new issues that we're dealing with? And more importantly, how are you guys as Persona kind of keeping up and staying ahead of the game, considering how fast these are emerging?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, obviously there's been a lot of deepfakes. I think there's kind of like three kind of things I would say. Like one, synthetic identities. We're seeing people now with not just like a deepfake, but a completely deep-faked kind of profile, faked documents, the whole package, right? And like this person doesn't even exist. And that, being able to create this stuff, it used to take a long time using, say, like Photoshop, and now all these tools are super accessible. They're super democratized. Anyone can come up with a synthetic profile very, very easily. And then on the deepfake side, live deepfakes in terms of voice and video, we're seeing those all the time now. A day doesn't go by where we don't see millions of these attempts that come through our system. And it's the same thing, right? You can go onto the dark webs, the underground web, and find different systems to bypass liveness, to bypass voice, etc. We've seen cases where folks have impersonated a CEO using a deepfake to commit high-risk transactions and this sort of thing. And I guess that really comes down to, okay, what are we doing about it? And I think the way that we think about detecting fraud, it's really taking a multi-layered approach, and I think it's really important not to sort of over-index on one particular layer. So, for example, one layer would be like the camera, the video layer. So what is the person submitting to you? But there's a whole bunch of behavior signals that we get around that, right? Like what device are they using? What network are they using? Does the behavior that they're doing kind of match what they were doing previously? And it's sort of talking about what we were saying about building a trust profile. At the same time, right, like these AI tools have given criminals an easier way to bypass systems, but they've also given us tools to be able to detect them too. So in a lot of ways, it really is a race. And so we're using everything that we have. And then the other part of that is that if you're detecting like a deep fake, we might combine maybe multiple signals from different areas of these different layers. So for example, if they create a deepfake, we might look at, say, the glare and see if that's actually a realistic glare or not. Or maybe a fraudster is using the same background over and over again within a fraud ring, and we connect that with, say, a particular device. And so using these different clusters, we're able to detect a lot of the fraud and apply these rules kind of instantly throughout many of the customers that we have. So once we detect something, within minutes we can detect the same kind of fraud, whether that's occurring in Poland, whether it's occurring in Spain or the States, et cetera. But yeah, it's not an easy one. There is no silver bullet to fraud.
And within this race, especially with some of the examples that you gave, it's kind of clear that some verticals, some sectors are going to be even more vulnerable to this, right? So Dan, turning back to you, especially when you guys are making investments or backing up startups in particular fields that are more vulnerable to synthetic fraud like health tech or fintech, how do you kind of evaluate that process or, again, figure out whether if they're going to be able to survive some of these threats?
I think that the identity fraud is something that affects all sectors that are facing consumers. Everything from health, digital health, to crypto and fintech. And I think this is always going to be a threat. I think people will get smarter and smarter about how to deal with it, but it will never go away. Yeah. We are now more concerned about what are the limitations to AI adoption that are coming from inherent drawbacks that are built into the technology. When you look at hallucinations, when you look at things that create non-deterministic behavior, and could actually, especially if you talk in the world of AI agents, if you give AI agents the capability to write into your system of records and they start to hallucinate, all of a sudden the problem is going to be much bigger than if you deal with one identity fraud or another. So these kind of roadblocks are the ones that keep me attentive, because I think that the current AI technology is years ahead of the market. The products are not yet there, and I expect to have much more lower technical work being done in order to deliver products to the market using the AI technology.
No, that totally makes sense, and it kind of connects the dots with everything else surrounded within today's topic. And I want to also make sure we focus on the sustainability angle as well. And Alex, I'll turn back to you on this. We all talk about sustainability and responsible AI, but especially in such a fast-paced environment, it's really hard to balance being able to have top-tier capabilities that you're kind of running towards while also keeping your environmental footprint limited. So how do you guys work on that at Persona?
Yeah, it's a tough one, right? We run millions of verifications, and of course that does take a lot of consumption computation. And there's a few things that I'd say we do. One, depending on the risk of the transaction, right? We'll use more basic checks if it's a low risk transaction. Whereas if it's something very high risk, we'll try to do something more advanced. So we're not trying to kind of beat all fraud with the same sledgehammer. The second part is, within our models, we try and be as efficient as possible. Saving 10% of computation with a model that's running millions of times saves a ton of energy. And so those are two ways. And then the last way, this might be sort of a cheeky response, but if you think about the cost that is lost if you don't detect fraud, right? So thinking about the cost of chargebacks, of account takeovers, of investigation, all kind of the fallout from not detecting fraud, I think that in the end also saves a lot of energy without the risk of sounding too cheeky there. But yeah, that's kind of how we think about sustainability.
That makes sense. And when we talk about responsible AI, I feel like that has been a buzzword, and it has been a headline for every single tech deck, every single pitch deck, but it comes down to actually, if the leader mindset is within responsible AI, if the data decisions that the teams are making are within responsible AI. So again, for early bird, but also for the investor perspective overall, do you think this is something at this point evaluated as a key metric, or is it still kind of like a nice to have?
I think that people are looking more at the potential of where the technology might go, but the current adoption is being hindered by the inherent problems and the drawbacks that are built into the current architecture. There are talks there are people that are saying that this is not going to go to AGI, so we don't have to be responsible. And I think that in the intermediate step, things like sustainability of energy consumption are things that are much more concerning. And we are looking at this. We are looking at how much, what's the ratio of total power consumed to compute power. We are looking at cooling. We are looking at heat capture and how you can improve of that. And at the other end, we are looking at more efficient compute, quantum computing. We are looking at energy sources. We invested in fusion energy. So we are trying to look across the entire value chain and trying to make things more efficient there.
So I want to make sure that we take all of this and have something to leave behind for our audience here. We have in our audience, brand leaders, innovators, entrepreneurs, and investors. So if there's one thing that you wanted to leave behind for them, and Alex, for you, I would love to hear from you for AI founders that are out there right now, how to have that balance of building consumer trust and protecting their identity from the up-and-coming fraud trends. And then for you, I would love to learn from the startups that are building today and really scared of the pace that is going on right now. How are they going to balance growth and responsibility from an investor perspective? Any of you can begin.
Sure. I think if there's one thing I can leave sort of AI founders to think about, it's that if you want to build trust, it's not something that you can sort of bolt on, later on. It has to be something that's built from the ground up. So whenever you're, making technical decisions on building your product and thinking about, okay, how do you manage data? What are you telling your consumers about what's being done with that data? What decisions are being made by AI models that might affect those end users? It's important to think about these things, and I would actually advocate being almost radically honest with these things. You want to be candid about what you're doing with your users' data, and this is because trust it's a long-term thing, and it can be broken within a second. So the minute that users lose trust and something bad happens, then users will not want to use your platform anymore. And so I think it's really important to build that trust early on and also measure it, right? Whatever measured gets managed, right? So if that means kind of measuring false positives that affect end users, you want to be able to measure trust in some way as well. So if there's one thing I would leave behind, it's building trust from the ground up.
For the startups as an investor, what we are seeing more recently is that our belief is that the core AI technology is 5 years ahead of the market, and this creates the opportunity for a lot of product companies to figure out a vertical, figure out the go-to-market, put a wrapper around core technology, and deliver a product to the market. And I think there will be a lot of these kind of companies. The mortality will be high, but the opportunity is also very high. Because if you look at the growth rates at the successful companies right now, everybody comes saying, we made it to 100 million quicker than everybody before. And this quicker than everybody before gets shrunken and shrunken more and more. So it used to be 18 months. Now people are talking about months, several months, or even weeks getting to here. And this also reflects into the mentality of the investors. It used to be the case that investors were very worried about companies that had high churn. But in today's world, even the best examples have both high growth and high churn. And investors are getting smarter about it because they understand that this is something that you can address in the future as the product gets more adoption and you see more users to your product. It's a change that reflects on how we invest, how we think about investments, but also it's an opportunity for the startups to go out and do and try new things.
That was an amazing wrap-up and a great leave-behind message. I actually had so many more questions for you guys. I feel like this topic has a lot of depth, that we could get into, but we're on time. If there is one thing that this conversation made clear, it's that the future of AI isn't just about innovation, it's about intention. Moving forward, to be able to move forward, we will actually need AI systems that are secure enough to trust, sustainable enough to last, and human enough to care. So thank you so much for being with us here today and making this session a spotlight for Web Brazil Summit 2025.
Thank you.
Thank you.